This is, Ray McCoy, also known as Bold Like a Leopard. Shout out to him. I meant to cover this earlier, but I will do it now, and then we'll close. The Transparency's public enemy, Professor Grift Biden. The fact-checking of Joe Biden's full professor claim shows the corruption of organizations like FactCheck. So on April 14th, Joe Biden made a visit to North Carolina at A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. His address to the students at the historically black college made headlines, not for the words he spoke, nor even the way he said them, but for the fact that when it concluded, he swiveled around to shake hands with someone only to find there was no one there. The Phantom Handshake became yet another overanalyzed episode demonstrating the weakened cognitive faculties of Joe Biden. A less remarked upon aspect of the appearance, however, was how Biden bragged that he was Professor Biden from Penn to his host, Dr. Robin Koger, the dean of the School of Engineering. In responding to this story, both his defenders and his critics have obscured the real point that the professorship was merely window dressing for a much larger corrupt endeavor. I cover the real purpose of Biden's position at Penn for American Greatness in 2 articles in the fall of 2020 about the Penn-Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. Biden's boastful claim was soon ridiculed by the RNC, which focused on the well-documented fact that Biden earned close to $1 million in 4 years of being listed as a professor while not teaching any academic courses. Fact-checkers came back and hedged on the topic. To their credit, both Snopes and PolitiFact acknowledged that Biden had never been involved at the university in any pedagogical. No. It's like pedagogy. Pedagogical. That still doesn't sound right, but that's as good as we're going to get. Capacity, as the title of the professor usually implies. They also noted that former Florida Governor Jeb Bush held a similar position at Penn as the presidential practice professor, without mentioning that Bush was A, replacing Biden when the latter began campaigning, and B, that Bush apparently did partake in lectures and classes. At the same time, both fact checks hedged the rest of their analysis to apply the labels mixture and half-truth to the final ruling, because the title professor nevertheless counts even if it's in honorarium. It is on these questions the fact-checkers actually obstruct real reporting, because rather than explore a topic, they limit it to an umpire's call in a baseball game, as if the depth of the claim in this case is the yes or no verdict of whether Joe Biden was listed as a professor or not. It is far from that. The whole function of Biden's professorship was to be a vehicle for foreign investment into Penn, enrichment of the former vice president, and to provide the veneer of academic standing to several core foreign and domestic policy aides who would follow him into the White House. When I wrote about the Penn-Biden Center and the Biden Institute of Public Policy and Administration at the University of Delaware, the 2020 election campaign was already in full swing, yet most Americans were completely oblivious to Biden's roles at these 2 educational institutions. Prior to those articles at the National Legal Policy Center alerted the Federal Department of Education that the Penn-Biden Center had received tens of millions of dollars in anonymous gifts, including $22 million from China alone. In addition, the Philadelphia Inquirer in 2019 asked what Biden had done to earn $900,000 from Penn since leaving the White House in 2016. Also that year, a Penn student's op-ed was published in the Inquirer asking how the former vice president had retained his honorarium despite accusations by Nevada politician Lucy Flores of inappropriate sexual touching, given the college previous stripping of similar titles from casino magnate Steve Wynn. I warned at the time that the complaint to the education department and the personnel list of both the PBC and BIPP were indicators of who would staff the Biden administration, including strategic cabinet level positions, and that there were numerous conflicts of interest arising from gifts received by Penn and the University of Delaware that both institutions were choosing not to make public. It is now more than 18 months later, and Biden is now president, yet, just as with the sordid affair of the Hunter Biden laptop, media organizations shy away from the real heart of the matter concerning Professor Biden. As of 2022, the group leading the Penn-Biden Center is limited to a business manager, multimedia specialist, and senior fellow. It is unclear why they would need a multimedia specialist, as it has not published a single video for 3 years and has no new articles or podcasts since 2020, when it had 12 people listed. So what happened to those people? Here's the full list. Anthony Blinken, then first managing director of the PBC, now U.S. Secretary of State. Ariana Bernagalt, then Director of Programs, Partnerships, and Strategic Planning of the PBC, now Senior Advisor to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Her career experience is largely limited to speechwriter for Obama for America in 2008 in the campaign, and USAID Administrator Rajiv Shah and Anthony Blinken. Michael Carpenter, then Second Managing Director of the PBC, now U.S. Ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation Europe. A career Foreign Service officer, Carpenter served under Obama on the National Security Council as Director for Russia, and later at the Pentagon as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, Eurasia, and Conventional Arms Control. Spencer Boyer, then Senior Fellow at the PBC, now Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for European and NATO Policy. He had previously served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for European and Eurasian Affairs and had held several academic and legal posts with organizations like the Brennan Center for Justice and Georgetown University. Dan Erickson, then Senior Fellow at the PBC, now Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Western Hemisphere. Juan Gonzalez, then Senior Fellow, now National Security Council Senior Director for the Western Hemisphere. Colin Cowell, then Strategic Consultant, now Under Secretary of Defense for Policy. Under Obama, he served in several positions, including Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Jeffrey Prescott, Strategic Consultant then, now Deputy to the U.S. Representative to the UN. He previously was a member of the NSC under Obama and was an Asia Policy Advisor to Biden, having taught at Chinese Peking University School of Transnational Law, while others, such as Associate Justice Samuel Alito, have also lectured there. The school has become increasingly controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Add to these Michael Donlian, former managing director of the Biden Institute, who's now a senior advisor in the White House, after having been a political aide and strategist for Biden since '81. Two other PBC staff, visiting scholars Malit Mefsin and Mark Voyager, do not hold official posts. Mefsin does serve on the State Department policy planning staff, while Voyager is the senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, a hawkish think tank in Washington, D.C. Samantha Vinograd, the former senior advisor at the Biden Institute, is now Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention at the Department of Homeland Security. Is that the bitch that used to go on CNN that looks like the puppet, what the fuck is that shit called? Not a chalupa on a stick, a jalapeno on a stick. You know who I'm talking? Remember, she got a fucked up face? Samantha Vinograd. I think that's the same one. Is there a link here? Yeah, this is the puppet. There's that comedian with the puppets. Yeah, that's her. That's her. So there's a comedian. Yeah, one eye is bigger than the other, okay? Kind of has an Igor thing. Not as bad as Pramila Jayapal. But, yeah, so she looks like, to me, the jalapeno on a stick of that comedian Jeff Dunham. She kind of looks like that, without the mustache, and without the green skin. But that's what I see anytime. Kind of like a wooden puppet face is really what I'm getting at there. All right, so she's in the Biden administration. If it seems as if the two institutions were part of the revolving door between government and academia, it's because they were. It's not unique for former D.C. colleagues to find themselves rubbing elbows in the same professional settings after leaving public service. What should be troubling is that here we had two large and accredited institutions partnering financially with a former vice president and numerous foreign governments to create such a setting in the interim period between different government posts. Only the most naive observer would ignore the following facts. Joe Biden, as vice president, was intricately involved in the Ukraine-Euromaiden conflict. His son Hunter has been involved in financial intrigues there. Since becoming president, Biden has overseen the greatest escalation to date in the conflict between Russia and the EU on one side, between Ukraine and the EU on one side and Russia on the other, and basically had his senior Ukraine foreign policy team kept intact and under salary throughout the Trump years. Who paid them? The same university that paid him a six-figure salary for almost no work after accepting tens of millions of dollars from anonymous foreign donors. For this exam from Professor Biden, for this exam from Professor Biden, a simple true-false question section will not do, PolitiFact. Yeah, it's all incestuous. All incestuous. So yeah, shout out to Ray McCoy. He did the journalism on the Rachel Maddow, John Mattis story. I've talked about it a bunch of times on stream. A few months ago, I went over it in detail. I forget why I did. Something was brought up. Oh, Ryan Grimm was brought up. Ryan Grimm is a total fraud. He's now with the show with Kim Iverson. Basic story. He used a source that was completely unreliable. This guy John Mattis that would just make up bullshit, and then he wrote it, I think, for Huffington Post about how Bernie Sanders' Facebook forum had Russian involvement or Russian bots, and then Rachel Maddow picked up on the story, did it on her show, and then put screenshots up there that had pictures of real people. And then those people had reputational damage done to them because they were apparently surrounded by lunatic leftists that were like, "Oh, you're Russians" or whatever. We interviewed them multiple times on the channel. Then he did undercover work with this guy. What was his name? I think his YouTube name was Just My Stupid Opinion. I believe that was his YouTube name. And so he kind of went undercover, called this guy Mattis, and got him to, I think, talk about shit within. I forget the details on that. It was, I think the guy just bullshitted. Like, I think Mattis was just talking mad shit about stuff. Anyway, they're still on YouTube. The interviews are still on YouTube, but there's a playlist. You can go down a huge rabbit hole. There's still a playlist. If you look up Bold Like a Leopard, John Mattis, Mattes, they should all come up. Last time I looked, there was a whole playlist. Okay.